Thorfinn's journey, the philosophy of vengeance, forgiveness, and freedom. Thorfinn, the son of Thors, is not just the protagonist of Vinland Saga. He is one of the most profound character studies in modern storytelling. His life is not merely a tale of blood and steel, but a meditation on vengeance, suffering, and the question of what it truly means to be free. In his journey, we see not only the rise and fall of a warrior, but the transformation of a human being. His story forces us to ask timeless philosophical questions. What happens when the purpose that drives you disappears? Is forgiveness weakness, or the highest form of strength? And can a man who has lived for nothing but violence ever find peace? Thorfinn's arc is, in essence, a philosophical odyssey, one that takes him from the depths of hatred to the possibility of redemption. Also, before we dive into the Vinland Saga lore, if you enjoy the video at any time, feel free to leave a like or subscribe, it's extremely appreciated. The seed of hatred. Every philosophy begins with a moment, an event that sears itself into our consciousness and shapes how we see the world. For Thorfinn, that moment is the death of his father Thors, at the hands of Askeladd. Thors was not an ordinary man. He embodied a paradox. Once a feared warrior, he abandoned the path of bloodshed, believing that true strength lay not in taking lives, but in protecting them. For young Thorfinn, his father was not just a parent, but the living embodiment of virtue. And so, when Thors was cut down before his son's eyes, the seed of hatred was planted. This is where philosophy enters. The Stoics argued that we cannot control external events, only our reactions. Epictetus famously said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you respond that matters." Thorfinn, however, is too young, too raw, to understand this. His response is not Askeladd in dishonorable ways. Instead, he follows him into battle after battle, hoping to earn the right to face him in a fair duel. Here, Thorfinn embodies a paradox of freedom and servitude. On the surface, he seems free, a warrior who fights, survives, and grows in skill. Yet, in truth, he is enslaved, not by chains of iron, but by chains of the spirit. His hatred for Askeladd dictates every action. He does not choose his path. Vengeance chooses it for him. This is where existentialist philosophy casts light. Jean-Paul Sartre wrote that man is condemned to be free. We are always free to choose. But many of us flee from that freedom by submitting to external causes. Thorfinn, though he believes he is exercising freedom by pursuing vengeance, is, in fact, fleeing from it. He has bound himself to Askeladd, letting his enemy define his existence. Ironically, it is Askeladd who understands freedom better than Thorfinn. Askeladd manipulates, schemes, and controls his own fate. He is ruthless, but autonomous. Thorfinn, meanwhile, is a slave to passion. This inversion sets the stage for the tragedy that follows. The philosophy of vengeance. Philosophers have long grappled with the meaning of vengeance. On one hand, it feels natural, even righteous, the impulse to correct an imbalance, to restore justice through retaliation. Yet nearly every great thinker warns of its dangers. Seneca argued that vengeance chains us to anger, making us no better than those we despise. Friedrich Nietzsche, in his reflections on resentment, warned that building one's identity on hatred creates a hollow existence. Even in the Christian tradition, the idea of turning the other cheek represents a radical rejection of vengeance. Thorfinn illustrates these lessons with painful clarity. His duels with Askeladd are not victories, but reminders of emptiness. Even when he grows as a warrior, even when he wins battles, his soul remains untouched, unchanged. His strength is a mask for weakness. There is a deep irony here. Thorfinn becomes everything his father stood against. Thors sought to escape the endless cycle of killing. Thorfinn embraces it. Thors believed true strength was found in restraint. Thorfinn equates strength with the ability to kill. The more he fights, the further he drifts from the man he once admired. Collapse and emptiness, but what happens when the object of vengeance is suddenly taken away? When Askeladd is killed, not by Thorfinn's hand, but by another's, Thorfinn's entire identity collapses. For years, his reason for living was singular, to avenge his father. And in one instant, that reason is gone. Here Thorfinn confronts what philosophers call the void. Viktor Frankl, the existential psychologist, argued that humans are meaning-seeking creatures. When deprived of meaning, we fall into despair. Thorfinn, robbed of vengeance, is left hollow. His body is strong, but his spirit is broken. He is a warrior with no war, a man with no purpose. This collapse is not just narrative, but philosophical. It reveals the fragility of an identity built on hatred. Hatred can sustain you for a time, but it cannot give you a future. When the fuel burns out, nothing remains but ashes. Slave arc and rebirth stripped of his purpose, Thorfinn enters a new chapter: slavery. On the surface, this seems like degradation, the loss of autonomy, the lowest possible state. Yet paradoxically, it is here, in chains, that Thorfinn begins to discover real freedom. Working the fields, living without a sword, Thorfinn confronts his past. Nightmares haunt him, visions of the people he killed, the blood he spilled, the path of destruction he walked. These visions force him into reflection. For the first time, he begins to question not only what he has done, but what kind of man he wishes to become. This is where philosophy shifts from abstract to lived experience. Thorfinn begins to practice a kind of pacifism, refusing to kill even when provoked. To many, this looks like weakness. But in truth, it is strength, the strength to resist the cycle of violence. Here Thorfinn embodies the wisdom of his father, long forgotten but not lost. A true warrior needs no sword. To refrain from killing when you can is harder than to strike. It requires courage, restraint, and vision. Through slavery, Thorfinn is paradoxically freed from vengeance, freed from his past self, freed to imagine a new future. Vinland as a concept, but what is that future? For Thorfinn, it becomes the dream of Vinland, a land of peace, free from the endless cycle of war. At first, this might sound naive, even utopian. Can there really be a land without slavery, without bloodshed, without cruelty? Yet this is not the point. Vinland is less a geographic location and more a philosophical horizon. It represents the possibility of living differently, of breaking the chains of history and creating a society built not on power, but on peace. Philosophically, Vinland functions like Plato's idea of the good or Kant's kingdom of ends, an ideal we may never fully reach, but one that guides our actions. It is a star on the horizon, shaping the course of the journey even if we never arrive. For Thorfinn, Vinland is not simply a place. It is redemption. It is a chance to build rather than destroy, to heal rather than wound. It is, in the deepest sense, his rebirth as a human being. Conclusion: the human condition, Thorfinn's journey, is more than a story of Vikings. It is a mirror held up to the human condition. We all wrestle with anger, loss, and the temptation of vengeance. We all risk losing ourselves in hatred, defining our lives by those who wrong us. But like Thorfinn, we are also capable of transformation. His arc teaches us that strength is not found in the sword, but in the will to put it down. That freedom is not the ability to do whatever we want, but the courage to choose who we will be. And that meaning is not found in vengeance, but in creating something that transcends suffering. In the end, Thorfinn becomes what his father always hoped he would. Not a killer, but a builder. Not a slave to hatred, but a free man. His journey reminds us that even the deepest wounds can become the soil from which new life grows, and perhaps that is the ultimate philosophy of Vinland Saga. That no matter how far we fall into violence and despair, there is always the possibility of change. There is always a Vinland, not just across the sea, but within ourselves.